up, and apologies if it repeats some of the things you've already heard, but you never know what people are going to say. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in Bangla Courtyard. I'm very honoured to be here with all these knowledgeable people. In this short presentation, I want to indicate that the unsurpassed Muslins of Dhaka gained a worldwide presence, although this success was to be nearly fatal. Next slide, please. These two quotes by the medieval Sufi poet Amir Khusrau and the 19th century English politician Edward Baines indicate that the Muslins of undivided Bengal had a powerful effect on the imagination over several centuries. Next one, please. Next one. Sorry, this is a terrible map. I'm not very clever with computer graphics, but I wanted to show this is a worldwide story. So this is intended to show how Muslin from Dhaka goes across the world and also to Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean and off to America, off to the left. But of course, it wouldn't go in straight lines. They went by long sea routes. It follows this story follows Indian and specifically Bengali thread. Long before the arrival of Europeans in the subcontinent, Muslin from undivided Bengal was being traded to ancient Rome, to China, to Arabia, the Ottoman Empire, and further afield. Travellers from the early Common Era reported on Dhaka Muslins with the same gasp of breath, really, all very impressed. So Gossypium arboreum, or tree cotton, as you've already heard, was the source of the fine cotton thread used for weaving muslin. It grew only in the areas around Dhaka, shown in brown on the map of the right, roughly. Although it became nearly but not quite extinct, if you've heard, it's being rescued. And efforts, as you've seen, efforts are being made to revive it now in Bangladesh. At the bottom there is the image of a cotton plant as imagined in the 14th century, which expresses the wonder felt generated by this soft fibre. The writer said, "There grew there in India a wonderful tree which bore tiny lambs, little sheep, on the ends of its branches. These branches were so pliable that they bent down to allow the lambs to feed when they're hungry." So it's a bit whimsical, but it sort of expresses this sort of romantic feel people have about this fibre. Next one, please. Muslin is a very simple cotton weave, but one which requires great skill in both the preparation and weaving of the thread. So you can see it's just over and under, over. It's not a complex weave at all. It's said that thread counts of 1,200 were achieved by the 18th century. Well, 500 is a high count today, so you can imagine the fineness of those cloths, which we can't see anymore. We don't have any examples. Next one, please. Are required in the production of muslin, as you've just seen in the film. And these images from the 19th century show just some of the processes involved. And today, it's very important to remember that one weaver still represents many livelihoods. So if you're counting weavers, you're counting a whole circle of people that support him and do the ancillary jobs. And this doesn't even include the growing and preparation of the cotton itself. Next one. Fine muslin was always a luxury commodity. The finest muslins were made in karkhanas or workshops reserved for the Mughal and other courts, and the loss of this patronage had a significant impact on the weavers. Next one. Fine muslins gained a worldwide market. Other Indian muslins were embellished in many ways. It was made in other parts of India, but never to this degree of fineness. They didn't have the same yarn. But in undivided Bengal, only chicken work and other hand embroidery was used to decorate it. There was no printing or other sort of decoration. So here you have two examples. There are two examples from the Victoria and Albert Museum of chicken and just a hand embroidered spot muslin, both from Dhaka. Next one. Here is muslin in its most sophisticated and complex form, jamdani, which incorporates traditional designs in a secondary weave inserted from the back of the cloth during weaving. It requires immense concentration and skill to do this, especially if you have two people working from either side of the fabric. You have to meet in the middle perfectly. It is this fabric that was recognised by UNESCO in 2013 as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, a great accolade for Bangladesh. Muslin was the cloth of kings and princes in India, and here is the future, on the left, the future 17th century Mughal Emperor Jahangir and his 20th and favourite wife Nur Jahan, both depicted in one image in the diaphanous muslin clothing worn at the court. More than a century later, muslin became favoured by European royalty, and here on the right is Queen Marie Antoinette of France, famously or notoriously dressed in muslin in 1783, in a style very different from the formal court costume. Muslin also was the favourite wear of Napoleon's first wife, Josephine, both before and after the French Revolution. It was a tough fabric, it survived. Next. In the Indian subcontinent, muslin was worn by both men and women. In the West, it was favoured by women and influenced a new, lighter style of dress, despite the northern climate. It became fashionable throughout Europe as far as Russia. Apparently, the palaces were kept very, very hot inside, so I suppose it was okay to wear such a light fabric. And it also went to North America. Next. The Ottoman court was criticised for spending too much money on importing Bengal muslin, as the Romans had been some 500 years earlier. And here on the left we see Sultan Suleiman, known as the Magnificent, in a huge muslin turban in the 1530s. And to the right, a Parisian fashion magazine of 1803 features the latest style in muslin dress. In 1600, the new British East India Company was granted a trade monopoly in the Indies by Queen Elizabeth I. It marketed muslin as hard as it had previously marketed the chintz of Masulipatam. As the East India Company's trade grew, so its buildings became grander. Started out as a small building, ended up with that one. New docks were opened in London for the company's ships, and sales of their imported goods, other things beside muslin, took place in East India House in the City of London, shown here. The 1789 list of goods for sale on the right actually includes 10,000 pieces of Bengal muslin that came on one ship. It was so light that a lot could be packed onto one vessel. Dhaka was exporting more than 170 million modern pounds worth of cloth at that time. Next slide. The company established itself in Bengal along with other European trading companies, and as you can, these are some of the arons, the factories that they established in Bengal, but they became militarily and politically dominant after it defeated the Nawab of Bengal at the Battle of Plassey or Palashi in 1757. The company came to dominate the existing system of production and trade in muslin, making ever greater demands on the weavers and effectively reducing most of them to debt bondage. Next one. The success of Indian textiles in the West brought about copying. Samuel Oldknow of Lancashire, England, died in 1828, there on the left with his roll of muslin, employed 1,000 hand weavers to weave imitation muslin, but used industrially produced thread. Quite fine muslins were produced in Britain, but they never matched those from Bengal. The footy carpus yarn could not be used on machinery. On the right is an example of British muslin dating from 1792. As you can see, it's quite coarse and overprinted with a very European design, not at all like the products of Dhaka. Imitation Bengal muslin was also produced in Scotland, at first by the highly skilled hand weavers of Paisley near Glasgow. On the right are some imitation Jamdani samples hand woven in Paisley, the end of the 18th century. Other countries like Switzerland and France also developed imitation muslin, much as they had copied Indian chintz or kalamkari. Exports from Britain of cloth to India eventually overtook imports of cloth from India by the early 19th century. So the writing was on the wall for Dhaka Muslin. Next. Here is one of the Scottish muslin factories that developed from the handloom enterprise. And here is the choice: complete mechanisation or using handcraft skills to enrich our culture and enrich human lives. Thanks very much.